Hello everyone and welcome back to this week's episode of Digital Law News. So we're just going to be running through some of the news stories that have come up in the last week and just discussing them today. So I'm joined with my colleague Peter today. And just for those who don't know, Digital Law is a small niche law firm based in the UK, and we specialise in things to do with data protection, cyber security, cyber law, and all things to do with technology matters as well. So I'll just pass over to Peter just to give himself a quick introduction before we start.
Thanks, Laura. Hello, everyone. Yes, we've got, as usual, quite a packed update for you. You might sometimes think, surely not much has happened this week, but despite everything over the course of the last month, from data adequacy to the issues with regards to the publication of news by social media platforms and what's happened in Australia, big stories like that. Well, a slightly quieter week this week, but nonetheless, a lot of really important things happening. So I'll pass over to Laura to take it away.
Thanks, Peter. So yeah, we'll be starting with our first story today then. So this is in regards to the security research that has been carried out into the LastPass, which basically is a app that users can use to store their passwords. It's kind of like a password manager. So this security researcher is recommending not to use this after they found that 7 trackers are found in the Android app. So from his research, there is no suggestion that the trackers are transferring any actual passwords or the usernames, but it is bad practice for such a security critical app to be handling such sensitive data in the first place in regards to trackers. So LastPass have come back and commented on this and have said that they use these trackers in order to help improve and optimize the product, and have said that no sensitive personal information is collected by the trackers regarding the user, and that users can opt out. So I think this is just the reminder that if possible, just don't use these types of apps. Just find another way of storing your passwords, because it's not always the securest.
Indeed, yes. Our steady advice to clients, and indeed when I've been asked this question on different panels and at conferences over the last few years, has always been, if possible, stay away from using password apps, in particular for business-related activity, because you cannot be entirely sure of their integrity. And of course, this has shown that the LastPass app certainly is not suitable for business-related activity. I think the key thing really is to really minimize your use of any apps like this. And in the same way, I mean, if you're a regular user of, for example, Google Chrome, whenever you end up logging into a system, it says, oh, can I remember this password for you? And I think the important thing there is always click on no, particularly related to things like, say, your business email or business system login information. Minimize your risk by minimizing the use of platforms for that sort of sensitive data. And I know that an awful lot of people will now be sort of thinking, great, this is incredibly difficult. How do we actually keep a track of all of these myriad passwords that we have? But not putting all of that highly sensitive data together and having it either stored inside your browser or stored inside a single password app has to be an essential. Otherwise, you're just increasing risk overall. So I'd certainly discourage the use of platforms like LastPass and any other platform, be it Google or Apple, for the storage of your passwords, particularly those business-related account details.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this applies to obviously anything that you store in your bank details on as well. So just basically avoid it at all costs unless it is a completely, unless it is an account basically that doesn't collect a lot of personal data, doesn't have that bank details and things like that on, that you wouldn't want being at risk.
Exactly. I mean, there are some accounts that do have an awful lot of very sensitive data attached It could be anything from payment information to records of previous purchases. So let's face it, things like an Amazon account, you can actually find out an awful lot of information about an individual. You could have anything from dietary habits, religious beliefs could be discerned from products and services that you order, or again, if you're buying food, then that could reveal a great deal. It could then also reveal your delivery details, so your home address might be on there. If it's depending on the account, it could be your work address. It could release details related to how often you travel, when, for example, what times are you at home, what times are you in the office, what times are you traveling. All of this sort of quite sensitive information could potentially be discerned by many of the apps and platforms that we use. So sometimes it's not just a matter of thinking, oh, what's the sensitive data involved here? Well, it's just my email address and password. Well, what if it's actually your GPS data? The Strava account, you might, there's not much on this, but if that Strava account reveals that you can be found running circles in the park every morning at 10 o'clock, or on a Monday to Friday at 10 o'clock, I wouldn't necessarily want to broadcast that far and wide. And I think it's a matter of sort of thinking about that risk and then, as I say, minimising it where you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Peter. So moving on to our next story for today then. This is in regards to the social networking site, Gab. So this is an American social networking site, and it is popular amongst Trump supporters in the US. And basically they have come out and released a statement saying that they have suffered a serious data protection breach. There isn't much information in terms of whether it's been reported to anybody, but obviously we do know from previous webinars as well that the procedures of things like that in the US is a lot different to how it is in the UK. But they have confirmed that 70 gigabytes of data has been stolen, and this includes 40 million public and private posts, which are now which were circulating on the social network, and password and user messages are also to be included in that as well.
Yes, indeed, a very large amount of data there that appears to have been compromised. It's become in the US quite common that since a number of people's accounts have ended up being blocked on Twitter and Facebook and more traditional platforms on the back of the disturbance at the Capitol on the 6th of January, many people have sort of been driven to other platforms, other instant messaging platforms, and other chat and social platforms. And in this instance, this one, Gab, appears to have been a target because it was perceived that there were more right-wing voices on there, and then this activist group called Distributed Denial of Secrets, or DDoS for short, if you see the irony of what they've done there. They've chosen to specifically wanting to hack it so that they could find the data related to its users and probably then publish it online. And this highlights several points. One is that these platforms are going to be targets of activists, and that the security on some of the newer platforms will simply not be at the level of the bigger and more established platforms, the Twitters and the Facebooks that have been running for a lot longer and in theory have much higher levels of security, though as we've seen over the years, that still doesn't mean that Twitter itself can't be hacked, which, for example, has happened in the not too distant past. So I think that the key thing here is to think about, just because you might now be on another platform doesn't necessarily mean that comments and statements made in what you think might be a small limited group of like-minded individuals doesn't necessarily mean that those comments couldn't end up being hacked and then published online more generally. So if you're going onto some of these other platforms, there will still be a significant risk, as there is with sharing any sensitive data online. And I think it's just a reminder of the fact that sometimes when it comes to quite I mean, this is the key thing, isn't it? I mean, within European data protection legislation, it defines things like any information related to data, related to ethnicity, with regards to gender, religion, trade union affiliation, as well as political opinion. All that is classed as highly sensitive data, so you're supposed to keep it strictly under lock and key. In the US, there is not the same level of regulation of these platforms, so they aren't under quite the same regulations, and indeed the penalty of large regulatory fines that platforms are in Europe. And therefore there is the risk that then they can be compromised and information can be more easily exfiltrated, and that is something that users do need to bear in mind when using some platforms that may look like being the big new thing on the that the people are using, but I still think very, very carefully in terms of going onto some lesser known platforms and sharing information on there, because it could so very easily be at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just making sure as well that anything that you do share on there, be aware that that could then be shared and be public, because it's like any text message, anything that you wouldn't be happy to be shared, like your account details, your payment information, your home address, anything that you wouldn't want to then be published online shouldn't be sent over such medium unless it's very secure, especially using things like this as well, as for like work purposes. You wouldn't want any of that information to go on the internet, so think about the platform that you're using.
Yes, and also, Laura, the point you make with regards to how this is reported, I mean, it's interesting that they've even bothered to confirm that this breach has happened, because in the US very often the presumption is we aren't going to go public about it. Though in this instance, I think because it was activists and they were saying online, you've been compromised, that the management felt under pressure to go and issue a statement. But very often the presumption in the US is, well, we aren't going to tell our data subjects, we aren't going to publish about this because we don't have to. The only time that you necessarily have to issue a public statement is when when you've got if it's a publicly traded company, and this particular platform isn't. But I mean, I think a final principle on this is, I mean, we tend in our firm to always take the principle of, in any communication, be it a text message, an email, would you be comfortable with this being published in court, or would you be happy if someone else saw it? And I think that's an incredibly important principle to have. How often do we see, and we've even seen this in Scotland this week, you know, text messages, WhatsApp messages, emails exchanged that are making the individuals involved squirm a little bit because of the language used and what's said. And I tend to think, you know, in 2021, you can never end up saying something online without thinking this could end up being published somewhere and could come back. So just think, would you be happy if it's published? If so, got nothing to worry about, have you?
Absolutely. So moving on to our next story then. So this is about parcels and the effect that Brexit is having on the postal system. So, 1 second. So yeah, basically Brexit is causing a delay for people's parcels, and I had this. I ordered a bag probably just after Christmas, and it didn't even turn up for like maybe 1 or 2 months later, and the whole cause of it was Brexit. But what then companies are then doing is adding these extra charges on, these additional taxes, which can be up to more than £100. But scammers are becoming aware of this, and they're then posing as the courier companies, as the postal people, and basically sending emails, sending texts saying that you have an extra bill to pay, and clicking on this link to pay the bill when it's not actually legitimate. So I think it's just, this whole story is just a reminder of phishing in general, and the way that scammers do operate, in terms of they see like an avenue to make money off people like this and kind of go down that route. So it's just basically making sure, if you do order something, making sure if you do get these additional taxes, which you may get, that they are in the correct way. So I think a lot of the taxes that you would get would be in a letter, or when you are collecting the item itself from the post office, and not just by a random text or a random email from a courier.
Yes, and I think this is a fascinating story because it shows how speedily reactive the fraudsters are. I mean, this particular issue with regards to products and services that had been ordered that previously there was no customs charge relevant to it. So say you ordered a product from France, suddenly it turns out that when that's being dispatched in January, it's now subject to a customs charge that has to be paid before it can be delivered, and that's leading to some of these issues with regards to the delivery company saying, well, someone has to pay this and therefore it's going to be you. And on the back of this, the fraudsters have realized, well, rather than just doing our usual courier delivery frauds, we can now say this is related to unpaid customs charges that were not paid at the time of the purchase but are payable now. And as we talked about last week, fraudsters are having a lot of success actually charging smaller amounts, thinking that as a whole they'll sort of think, well, let's just charge someone, as part of a fraud, we'll look at an amount of £5 or £10 rather than necessarily being like 60 or 70. I mean, if it's more than 50 quid, you'll turn around and go, oh, that's a bit steep, I'm going to query that. But if it's say £5, £10, the old £7.99 here, £9.99 there, very often people will go, oh, fine, whatever, and just pay it just to get it out of the way. And in this instance, they could end up paying money unnecessarily to fraudsters, thinking, well, this is just to allow my package to be delivered. And therefore, it's a very real threat. And I think the fraudsters are having a lot of success on this. But it comes back to it. It's our constant guidance and advice to say, whenever you receive a notification like this, via an email, via a text message, use your reliable contact information based on when you originally made the order to contact them and say, is this genuine and how do I go about making payment? Do not follow any links that you may receive in an SMS or an email. Go back to the source of the original transaction and use the trusted contact information that you know is genuine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is just a reminder about the other scams that are currently taking place as well. Like, scammers always find the vulnerabilities, so a reminder about the COVID vaccination texts that are going out. I actually received one this morning, and I know I saw it and I was like, oh, COVID vaccination, great. And then I looked at it, I was like, that's not real. Obviously it's not. But yeah, I think it's just a reminder that people do take advantage of these risks, and they know people are vulnerable to these such things and will just click on it to get it out of the way. So it's just a reminder.
I think there, Laura, we know that if you're getting a text saying it's time for your vaccination, we know that the UK vaccine programme is proceeding at rocket speed. If people in their 20s are being notified at that point, if you're in your 20s and not highly vulnerable, then that really shows that things are going well. But of course, you and I think, are going to be waiting for a few more months yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately. So yeah, the next story is in regards to Microsoft and some of the vulnerabilities that they have raised. So Microsoft have come out and said that updates, some urgent updates are necessary for the Exchange server and the vulnerabilities. So these apply to the Microsoft Exchange server versions 2013, 2016 and 2019. And an update has been made available for the 2010 version as well. So these vulnerabilities are due to sophisticated actors that have attacked a number of the Exchange servers, and these have been released ahead of the monthly update cycle, because 4 of the 7 vulnerabilities have actually been targeted and successful attacks. I'm not sure if they were successful, but there was some type of targeted attack as well there. So this isn't in related to the Exchange Online, it's just the Exchange servers, and they're basically recommending that all these updates are installed immediately.
Yes, so I have great sympathy for all of the IT personnel who will be rapidly scrambling in different organisations, large and small, that are reliant on the Microsoft Exchange service to for their communications that we're relying on even more at this time of pandemic when we're all working from home. Yeah, it will be a significant pressure on them to get this done, as the article says, outside of the normal monthly update. So I can imagine it's actually very difficult to find time, particularly in organisations where you've got, say, a global workforce working in different time zones. Trying to find time when someone won't need to have access so that you can successfully run the update, test it, make sure it's all working, will be very, very difficult. And I can imagine an awful lot of people having to do that over the course of weekends and what would otherwise have been personal time that's compromised by the need to do this. But the fact this is being done outside of that normal monthly update shows the urgency on this, and the fact that clearly there has been a significant attack or significant threats, and they're clearly, you know, Microsoft are clearly doing everything they can to make sure their system remains secure. Needless to say, if you're taking on Microsoft, your resources yourself to do that must be quite significant. And I do wonder if this is state-sponsored actors behind this, seeking to compromise the business systems of some of the more developed economies around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when it does become a such a sophisticated act like this on such a big company as well, it always comes back to whether it is state actors, because that's usually the case. So moving on to our last story of the day then. So this is in regards to the ICO. Sorry, skipped ahead then. So this is in regards to the ICO and their new children's code, which is coming into force in the next 6 months. So this actually came into force unofficially last year in 2nd of September. But there has been a 12-month transition period, so that I think this is why it's not been in the news as much, or basically not many people may have heard of it, or not started making the changes that they need to do. So this applies to basically all organisations who have a major online services used by children in the UK. And there's basically 15 standards that must be applied to, or must be basically taken aboard. So these include having the best interests of the client, data protection impact assessments, age appropriate design, things like transparency, having policies, trying to minimise the amount of data that is collected and shared, not using things like nudge techniques, and there's information in there about connected toys and devices as well. So I think this is just a reminder that if you do collect a lot of personal data on children, or any at all online, just making sure that you are aware of this and are making the changes as well.
Yes, thanks, Laura. I think this is a very timely reminder from the ICO, because we spend a lot of time when we're advising our clients on privacy, of when we're going through the privacy policy, we'll always ask, look, is this product, is this service specifically aimed at processing data related to children?
Yeah.
Because if you can actually turn around and say, no, it isn't, and our platform is designed for adults, you know, and it's 13 or above is the definition in the UK of are you a child or not. But if you can actually turn around and say, look, our product is designed for use by adults, for adults, and not being aimed or marketed at children and shouldn't be used by children, then you can actually then mean that you're actually lifting your platform out of the need to comply with all of these measures. Though if you are going to be processing data related to children, this is a significant requirement. I mean, there's some things like, for example, the best interests of the child, that you would think, well, obviously that should be the case. But I found it quite interesting looking at this article and then comparing it with a piece that was in the Sunday Times this weekend just gone that looked at addiction in children to video games. And they could be using anything from, and this is as quoted in the article, they talk about the highly addictive platforms like Fortnite and Minecraft. And we're talking here about more than just, you know, kids spending a few hours on this and parents having a general concern, oh, they're addicted to it. They actually talked about people who've required medical treatment because, you know, the average child would be playing on it, and then when the parent says your dinner's ready, 10 minutes later the child will come to dinner. In this instance, they found that very often you had children who would simply not eat. Such was their level of addiction, and then playing overnight, and then if the parents switched the router off, they would go and get on the bike, travel somewhere even in the middle of the night, so they could then get onto some free public Wi-Fi and carry on playing. Such was the level of addiction. Now, you don't get that kind of addiction without breaching some of the requirements in this list of 15 points. Point 12, nudge techniques. That would be the idea of nudging a user towards in-app purchases to make them then, you know, buy this to get the next level, or that level as well of the nudge technique where you're sort of, because you've spent so many hours playing, you almost think, well, I need to carry on playing, otherwise it negates the hours I've already spent. And there's a lot of that done by the designers of games to make people carry on playing them. That's the aim of the game. But when that's then being applied and you've got children using it, it's clearly in at the moment, you know, some fairly limited cases, but who knows, it could be far wider than is currently known. This is clearly having a detrimental effect. So that the use of this code to ensure that this technology is being used in an age appropriate way, and that, you know, principles around data minimization and the sharing of data are properly followed when it comes to children is only right and proper. I don't think there's anything in here that is overly onerous if your platform has made the decision to say we are going to target children. So it all makes a lot of sense when you think, if we are going to do this, these are the things we'll have to do. And as you know, Laura, there are a few of our clients have developed programs that are, and systems that are deliberately there to provide a service that children and families would want to use. And provided you jump through these hoops, nothing wrong with that. But it'll be interesting to see the response of some of those game platforms, because clearly they are being used by children. They might say, oh, well, actually, we don't want those below 13 using our platform, but they do. We know that. We know how popular platforms like Fortnite and Minecraft have been. And from September this year, they'll have to make sure they're complying with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing here as well is that a lot, like you mentioned, this shouldn't be very onerous on companies. A lot of these things should already be in place. Like when you're carrying out a new website or a new service in your company, you should be carrying out a data protection impact assessment already, and we advise all our clients to do that. So these things shouldn't be a new thing. They're not different to kind of what is in GDPR. It's kind of just like an extension of that, and a bit more tailored to children, and just basically a reminder that these are the things you should be doing. So it's not like companies have to reinvent the wheel to make sure they're complying with this code. A lot of companies will already be doing this.
Exactly, and it's a good point with regards to the DPIA there, Laura. I mean, that is something that, you know, any organisation that's handling personal data should have one in place. We even turn around to our startup clients and say, look, if you can't afford this, that's absolutely fine. We understand that. So, you know, here's the link to the CNIL platform. They've got a, you know, the Food Safety Protection Regulator. They've got this software you can use that guides you through doing your own DPIA. So if you've got, you know, you might be cash poor but a bit more time rich, spend the time to at least have your own working DPIA in place, and then a little bit further down the line we can help you with that. We might review it, we might carry out another one for you, or you can take a look. The ICO have got their own template that helps you with doing a DPIA. And then, it very often doesn't take long, and you'll get a client that says, actually, I can't spend the time doing this. Can you do it for me? And we say, yeah, here you go. Here's the fixed fee. And they go, great, because actually, we can turn around and then take that burden away from them. And very often it doesn't. There's very often not a particularly big gap between the startup that says we ain't got the money compared to the startup that then says we actually haven't got the time. Can you do this for us? So at least we know that we are getting compliant, and the plan that you get in place on the back of a DPIA is something you can then use to demonstrate to the regulator to say, look, we've identified the risks and we're now doing something about it. So it's a key plank when it comes to good compliance anyway, for any platform, but it is indispensable when you're processing the data of children, as are the other good principles that are contained in this code.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is everything, and we've got time for today. So just a little reminder about our GDPR compliance manual for legal practices. So this is still on offer for £99. So this contains loads of forms, checklists, information about how you can protect, basically how you can comply with GDPR in a law firm or any other practice similar to this. I know, Peter, we've had a lot of accountants and those in the financial services come to us and actually find this helpful as well. So yeah, it's not just for law firms. But yeah, if you want to say anything else about it, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I think really the thing is, if you're regularly listening to us and thinking, well, this is all well and good, but actually I'm not sure where to even start in terms of how to get my organisation, my company up to speed when it comes to complying with all of these principles, this provides you with the tools to help you to get started. So it's got things like as you say, the forms, the templates, the checklists, as well as examples of good practice and examples of bad practice, so you can look and learn from where people have made mistakes on the way. And it's also, I'm pleased to say, written in clear, plain English. So a lot of the feedback we get is this is actually good and practical and good to understand. We can read this without feeling you've got to go and get a degree in tech and legal speak in order to see what's in there. And believe me, putting that stuff into plain English isn't work of a moment, but we know that it's something that I think people value as a result. So it's there. It's a really useful guide, and I think it's a good starting point if you're wondering how do we work on making sure that our organisation is on top of all of these issues.
Absolutely. So yeah, if anyone's interested in that, just drop us an email to admin@digitallawuk.com, and we'll be able to get that sorted. So just a reminder, this recording will be available as a webinar and a podcast. So it gets uploaded onto our website, our YouTube channel, and the podcast channels as well. So thank you once again to Anson Evaluate for helping us produce this webinar, and we hope to see everyone else again next week. Thank you.